pull the stuff up. If I am live, it's not saying I am. Though that is saying I'm live. Okay. There you go. It's live. Just probably this phone's just been glitchy, son of a bitch. It is a bit zoomed out. Quite frankly. So yeah, I'll grab you, put you behind my back. Got Treasure Planet, yes. Let's see if I can reading a bit more of it. So let's see. In the meantime, we had found nothing of any value but the silver and the trinkets, and neither of these were in our way. Underneath there was an old boat clock, whitened with sea salt on many a harbour bar. My mother pulled it up with impatience, and there lay before us the last things in the chest. A bundle tied up in oilcloth and looking like papers, and a canvas bag that gave forth a touch the jingle of gold. I'll show these rogues that I'm an honest woman, said my mother. I'll have my dues and not a further over. Hold Mrs. Crossley's bag, and she began to count over the amount of captain's score from the sailor's bag into the one that I was holding. It was a long, difficult business, for the coins were of all countries and sizes, doubloons and louis and guineas and pieces of 8, and I know not what besides, all shaken together at random. The Guinness too were about the scarcest, and it was with these only that my mother knew how to make her count. When we were about halfway through, I suddenly put my hand up her arm, and for I had heard in the silent, frosty air a sound that brought my heart into my mouth, the tapping of the blind man's stick upon the frozen road. It drew near and nearer, and while we sat holding our breath, then it struck on the inn door. And then we could hear the handle being turned and the boat rattling as the wrenched being tried to enter. And then there was a long time of silence, both within and without. At last the tapping recommenced, and to our indescribable joy and gratitude it died slowly away until it ceased to be heard. "Yeah, mother," I said, "take the whole and let's be going," for I was sure the bolted door must have seemed suspicious. Excuse me. And would bring the whole hornet's nest about our ears, though how thankful I was that I had bolted it. None could tell who had never met that troubled blind man. But my mother, frightened as she was, could not consent to take a fraction more than was due to her, and was obstinately unwilling to be content with less. It was not yet 7, she said. By a long way she knew her rights and she would have them, and she still arguing with me when a little low whistle sounded a good way off up on the hill. That was enough and more than enough for both of us. I'll take what I have, she said, jumping to her feet, and I'll take this great account, said I, picking up the oilskin packet. Next moment we were both groping downstairs, leaving the candle by the empty chest. And the next we had opened the door and were in full retreat. We had not started a moment too soon. The fog was rapidly dispersing. Already the moon shone quite clear on the high ground on either side, and it was only a thin veil still hung unbroken to conceal the first step of our escape. Far less than halfway to the hamlet, very few beyond the bottom of the hill, we must come forth into the moonlight. Nor with this all, for the sound of several footsteps running came already to our ears, and as we looked back in their directions, a light tossing to and fro and still rapidly advancing showed that one of the newcomers carried a lantern. "My dear," said my mother suddenly, "take the money and run on. I am going to faint." This was certainly to the end of both of us, I thought. How I cursed the cowardice of the neighbours, how I blamed my poor mother for her honesty and her greed, for her past foolhardiness and present weakness. We were just at the little bridge. By good fortune, I helped her, tottering as she was, to the edge of the bank, were sure enough the gate. Words. She gave a sigh and fell on her on my shoulders. I do not know how I found the strength to do it all, and I am afraid I was roughly done, but I managed to drag her down the bank and a little way under the arch. Further I could not move her, for the bridge was too low to let me do more than crawl below it. So there we had to stay, my mother almost entirely exposed, and both of us within earshot even of the inn. Oh, blimey. Chapter 5. The Last of the Blind Man. My curiosity in a sense, was stronger than my fear, for I could not remain where I was, but crept back to the bank again, whence, sheltering my head behind a bush of broom, I might command the road before our door. I was scarcely in position ere my enemies began to arrive, 7 or 8 of them running hard, their feet beating out of out of time along the road, and the man with the lantern a few paces in front. 3 men ran together, hand in hand, and I made out, even though the mist, that the middle of this trio was the blind beggar. The next moment his voice showed me that I was right. Down, down with the door, he cried. Aye, aye, sir, answered 2 or 3, and rushed was made upon the Admiral Benbow, the lantern bearer following, and then I could see them pause and hear speeches passed in a lower key, as if they were surprised to find the door open, but the pause was brief, for the blind man again issued his commands. His voice sounded louder and higher, as if he were afire with eagerness and rage. In, in, he shouted and cursed them for their delay. 4 or 5 of them obeyed at once to remain on the road with the formidable beggar. There was a pause and a cry of surprise, and then a voice shouting from the house, Bill's dead! But the blind man swore at them again for the delay. Search him! Search him! Some of you shrieking lubbers, and the rest of you aloft, get the chest, he cried. I could hear the foot rattling upon our old stairs, so that the house must have shook with it. Promptly afterwards, fresh sounds of astonishment arose. The window of the captain's room was thrown open with a slam and a jingle of broken glass, and a man leaned out into the moonlight, head and shoulders, and addressed the blind beggar on the road below him. Phew, he cried. They've been boss. Someone's turned the chest out our loft. Oh, Pew, not few. It is there. It is there, roared Pew. The money's there. The blind man cursed the money. Flint first, he cried. We don't see it here no more, nowhere, no how. We don't see it here no how, returned the man. Here you below there, is it on Bill? Cried the old man, the blind man again. At that, another fellow, probably him who had remained below to search the captain's body, came to the door of the inn. Bill's been overhauled already, he said. Nothing left. It's these people of the inn. It's not the boy. I wish I had put his eyes out, cried the blind. Cried the blind man, Pew. They were here no long ago. They had the door bolted when I tried it. Scatter lads, and find them. Sure enough, they left that glimmer here, said the fellow from the window. Search, scatter, and find them. Root the house out, reiterated Pew, streaking with his stick upon the road. Then there followed a great to-do through all our old inn even, heavy feet pounding to and fro, furniture thrown over, doors kicked in until the very rocks re-echoed, and the men came out again, one after another on the road, and declared that we were nowhere to be found. and just then the same whistle whistle that had alarmed my mother and myself over the dead captain's money was once more clearly audible through the night, but this time twice repeated. I had thought it to be the blind man's trumpet, so to speak, summoning his crew to the assault, but I now found that it was a signal from the hillside towards the hamlet, and for its effort upon the buccaneers, a signal to warn them of approaching danger. "Ah, there's Dirk again," said one. "Twice. We have to budge, mates." "Budge, you skunk," cried Pew. "Dirk was a fool and a coward from the first. You wouldn't mind him. They must be close by. They can't be far. You have your hands on it. Scatter and look for them, dogs, and shiver me soul," he cried. "If I had my eyes. If I had eyes even." This appeal seemed to produce more effort, for two of the fellows began to look here and there among the number, but half-heartedly, I thought, and with half an eye to their own danger all the time, while the rest stood isolated on the road. "You have your hands on thousands, you fool, and you hang and leg. You'll be rich as kings if you could find it, and you know it's here, and you stand there malingeering. There wasn't one of you dared to face villain, and I did it, a blind man, and I'm too loose, my chance for you. I'm to be a poor crawling beggar, sponging for rum, when I might be rolling a coach. If you had the pluck of a weevil in a biscuit, you could catch them still." "Hang it, Pew. We've got the doubloons," grumbled one. "They might have hit the blessed thing," said another. Take the George's view, and don't stand here squalling." Squalling was the word for it. Pew's anger rose so high at these objections till at last, his passion completely taking the upper hand, he struck at them right and left to his blindness, and his stick sounded heavily on more than one. This quarrelling was the saving of us. For a while it was still raging. Another sound came from the top of the hill and the side of the hamlet. The trumpet horses galloping almost at the same time. A pistol shot flash and report came from the hedge side, and that was plainly the last signal of danger, for the buccaneers turned at once and ran, separating it in every direction, one seaward along the cove, one slant across the hill, and so on, so that in a half a minute not a sign of them remained, but Pew, him they had deserted, whether in sheer panic or out of revenge of his ill words and blows, I know not, but there he remained behind, tapping up and down the road in a frenzy and groping and calling for his comrades. Finally he took the wrong turn and ran a few steps past me towards the hamlet, crying, "Johnny, Black Dog, Dirk," and other names. "You won't leave old Pew, mate, not old Pew." Just Then the noise of horses topped the rise, and 4 or 5 riders came in sight of the moonlight and swept a full gallop down the slope. Oh, blimey. Excuse me. At this Pew saw his error and turned with a scream and ran straight for the ditch, into which he rolled, but he was on his feet again in a second, and made another dash, now utterly bewildered, right under the nearest of the coming horses. The rider tried to save him, but in vain. Down went Pew with a cry that rang high into the night, and the 4 hooves trampled and spurned him and passed by. He fell on his side, then gently collapsed upon his face and moved no more. I leaped to my feet and hailed the riders. They all were pulling up at any rate. Horrified at the accident, I saw what they were. One trailing out behind the rest was a lad that had gone from the hamlet to Dr. Livesey's. The rest were revenue officers whom he had met by the way, and with whom he had the intelligence to return at once. Some news of lugger in Kit's Hole had forwarded its way to Supervisor Dance, and set him forth that night in our direction, and so the circumstances my mother and I owed our preservation from death. Pew was dead, stone dead. As for my mother, when we had carried her up to the hamlet, a little cold water and salts, and that soon brought her back again. And she was none the worse for her terror, though she still continued to claw the balance of the money. In the meantime, the supervisor rode on as fast as he could to Kit's Hole, but his men had to dismount and grope down the dingle, leading and sometimes spotting their horses, and in continual fear of ambushes, so it was no great matter for surprises that when they got down to the hole, the lugger was already on the way. Though still close in, he hailed her. A voice replied, telling him to keep out of the moonlight, or he would get some lead in him. And at the same time, a bullet whistled close by his arm. Soon after, the lugger doubled the point and disappeared. Mr. Dance stood there, as he said, like a fish out of water, and all he could do was dispatch a man to warn the cutter. Now let's see, it says B. At that, he said, it's just about as good as nothing. They've got off clean, and there's an end only. He said, I'm glad I trod on Master Pew's corns, for by this time he had heard my story. I went back with him to the Admiral Benbow, and you cannot imagine a house in such a state of smash. The very clock had been thrown down by the fellows in their furious hunt after my mother and myself, and though nothing had actually been taken away except the captain's money bag and a little silver from the till, I could still see at least that we were ruined. Mr. Dance make nothing of the scene. They got the money, you say. Oh, they got the money, you say. Well then, Hawkins, what in fortune were they after? More money, I suppose. No, sir, not money, I think, replied I. In fact, sir, I believe I have the thing in my breast pocket, and to tell you the truth, I should like to get it put in safety. To be sure, boy, quite right. He said, I'll take it for you, if you like. I thought perhaps Dr. Livesey, I began. Per- perfectly right. Perfectly right, he interrupted very cheerily. Perfectly right, a gentleman and a magistrate. And now I come to think of it, I might as well ride around there myself and report to him or a squire. Master Pew's dead when all's done, and that I regret it, but he's dead, you see, and people make it out against an officer of his magistracy, his revenue. It might, if my, yeah, if make it out if they can. Now I'll tell you, Hawkins, if you like, I'll take it along. I'll take you along even. I thanked him heartily for the offer and walked back to the hamlet where the horses were. By the time I had told my mother of my purpose, they were all in the saddle. Dogger, even, said Mr. Dance, you have a good horse. Take up this lad behind you. As soon as I mounted, holding the dogger's belt, the supervisor gave the word, and the party struck out to a bouncing trot to Dr. Levy's house. And how long have I been live? 27 minutes. Well, to be fair, I'll leave this here. Because that's all I want and can do it right now. Maybe an hour another time. Maybe 2 or 3. So until next time, ladies, gentlemen, whoever else, tally ho.